This is a show where you get to be the star. We'll make a great episode together, no matter how boring or awkward you feel. The best part is that it's all done remotely, so participating is really easy. Contact us at everyonecast.com, and you can have your own episode on this show. Try and get a little bit of sunlight. I'm Anthony Salvato, and this is Josh Fischer, Mr. House Hacker Real Estate Guy.
Hey, Anthony. Thanks for having me on.
Among other things, too. In fact, you have a whole website, a very well-titled website, growyourcash.com. You offer a whole bunch of services on there.
Yeah, let's go ahead and plug the website. So Grow Your Cash is something that I came up with maybe 10 years ago. Professionally, I'm an accountant, and I offer notary services. So it's a compilation of a lot of different things that I work on, kind of a portfolio site. I haven't touched it in quite a while, but part of this podcast is really kind of re-exploring what I enjoy and maybe even introducing house hacking into that Grow Your Cash site, kind of guiding individuals through their options with investing in real estate, and then my accounting services if they have a business that they're trying to develop.
Now, what exactly is house hacking? Do I sit at a computer and snoop on people's Wi-Fi? Is that what that is?
Well, not quite. So house hacking is just a concept of taking something like maybe a single family home. As we know, housing is really expensive nowadays, and just looking at how can I afford it. If you think of maybe a triangle, 3 different sections, 3 different things people look for, it's like location. Highly desirable locations are pretty expensive. Another corner is basically privacy. A lot of people want to have privacy in their life, in their home. It's hard to imagine sharing it. And then that third thing is, of course, affordability. A lot of the time you have to choose kind of a compromise, maybe 2 of those 3 variables. So house hacking is usually giving up your privacy in order to get a more ideal location, maybe a school district or living in the city, closer to your job, and then reducing the price point through, again, usually co-living with roommates.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But aren't there also other parts of the equation? Like, for example, the build quality of the house is important too. Or are you only talking about where you want to live versus the actual amenities of the house?
Yeah, so I actually want to take a step back and maybe address house hacking can be anything from an apartment that you're renting. You don't actually need to physically buy a home. It could just be, I've got an apartment, it's $1,000 a month. Now I'm going to introduce a roommate. I'm going to convert the space, adding an extra bedroom, or maybe there's already an existing bedroom that I'm going to put somebody in to lower my cost of living. House hacking can be that simple, or you take it to the next level where you are looking at a property you're buying. I would say build quality is not super important, mainly because you can take almost any floor plan and create a new room just looking at some of the open concepts today. Like if there's a dining room, if there's a living room, typically you can just add a curtain or some kind of partition and you're in business and you have an extra space that's available to rent. Some people convert garages, for instance.
Similar to the idea that a 2-bedroom apartment rental is always cheaper than a 1-bedroom if you are splitting those 2 bedrooms with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're looking at a 2-bedroom, the price point is maybe a couple $100s more per month. But usually when you split your cost, you're reducing your cost by 50%, where just that room, it goes for such a premium.
Do you use this idea in your own housing situation as well? Tell us about your personal real estate experience.
So I was completely shocked in college when I started living in a dormitory, literally sharing a room, maybe 200 square feet with somebody else. I was shocked how much I enjoyed that, because when you have that intimacy, of course, it kind of challenges you, it develops you, where you're both working out, studying, like you're staying very focused. Your roommate's going to a party, you probably got an invite too, just because you are so personal. So after college, I kind of kept that mindset going and literally bought a condo right after college, immediately started renting out some of the space. I took a 1-bedroom, 660 square foot plan, turned it into a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. Of course, the consideration here is that you're sharing a bathroom, which some people might not want to cross that line. But it allowed me to pay off my mortgage a lot faster and really kind of sets you up for success with future properties when you build equity in your property.
How did you afford all of that right after college?
Luckily, with, again, grow your cash, just being an accounting major, I've always had side jobs that I've worked on kind of a down payment. And one of the considerations is I was very limited. When I was first looking for a home after college, I had about three options. I could buy a really cheap home in kind of a less desirable area of town, maybe 30 minutes away from where I am today. I could buy a micro apartment, less than 500 square feet in uptown Dallas, Texas, a very bougie area. I just couldn't wrap my mind around living in that small of a space. But ultimately, I kind of settled on the one bed, one bath because I saw that it had enough space that I could split it up. And when you look at the down payments, if you put down 3 to 5%, really at that time, you could still buy an apartment for $5,000 a down payment.
Oh, that's pretty crazy. I didn't know it was that affordable. I mean, I don't know how long ago that was.
About 5 to 6 years ago. Now downtown Dallas, I mean, it's probably doubled in value. There still are $50,000 to $100,000 properties that are available, but as you touched on, build quality and location. Sometimes, if it sounds too good to be true, just cheap properties, you kind of have to avoid the headaches, the maintenance, especially if there are foundation issues or like a roof or AC that you've got to replace. Maybe just don't take that risk and buy too cheap of a property.
Is that condo you purchased right after college the same condo you're in now? Because at least from my view, whatever you're in now looks quite nice. You have a beautiful view right behind you.
Thanks. It is not. So I actually bought the cheapest floor plan in the building, smallest, lowest floor. Ultimately, I made friends with one of my neighbors and traded up within the building. So after living with a roommate for 5+ years, I came into a position where I could actually just privately buy a second unit. And I'm actually in the process of selling my original condo at the moment.
What's your long-term goal? Are you trying to accumulate as many properties as you can?
That was my original goal when I moved into this building. I was kind of moving in at the bottom floor. I was planning to buy a new unit every couple of years, just move my way up.
Until you own the whole building.
Yes. I think it's been a blessing and a curse as far as property values appreciating at this accelerated pace. A consideration when you think about buying a property is the HOA, basically the homeowners association. Those fees, even on a very affordable unit, can be almost the same as your mortgage. And the same with property taxes. The higher your valuation goes, so do your taxes go up as well. So I quickly found out the building I'm living in is not an investment. Ultimately, house hacking allows you to live anywhere you want and kind of reduce your housing costs, but it can't make any property an investment property. A lot of individuals who own rentals here are actually losing money every month. They're doing it more because they want to actually move in at a future date, like to move back into their original unit, not to generate cash flow.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because at least Dallas in particular, you have the disadvantage of having extremely high property tax. So if you're going for a mortgage and then you have HOA fees and a property tax, how can you possibly have a positive cash flow if you rent out a unit?
Absolutely. Let's take a step back and just talk about how lending works. So if you work as a W-2 employee, you just get a job, you get your first paycheck. I think within 1 or 2 paychecks, you can go talk to a mortgage lender. They'll let you borrow based off the assumed, if they extrapolate your paycheck, they assume you're going to make that for the rest of the year. They'll let you borrow up to 45% of that take-home pay and consider it housing. And that 45% of your income is considered, again, the mortgage, the HOA, the taxes. So they'll limit you to that extent. In my experience, property taxes and HOA, at least for condos, are going to be half the cost. So if you have, let's say, $1,000 of those fees collectively, whatever's left is what you're going to get in a mortgage. And when it comes to buying a home, the mortgage, it plays a part in it. So if you're buying a $100,000 property and you only have $5,000, like in my circumstance, I had to finance the remaining $95,000. So the $95,000, you have to fit into some kind of payment plan, whether it's 15 years, 30 years. Sometimes the bank will just say, no, you can't afford all these costs on top of each other. I remember even back then, my income was actually a little under 40,000. It was kind of a stretch. My housing was on paper 40 to 45% of my income. So without a roommate, it definitely made me house poor. With a roommate, though, it created a lot of margin.
Now, what happens if the housing market goes south? How does that affect you? Or how would it affect any other potential real estate enthusiasts?
So that's what I love about house hacking, is that in a bad economy, people are looking for rooms. They want to reduce their expenses. Maybe they lost a job and it's choosing between, do they move back home with their parents, or do they actually rent a room and maintain some level of independence? As the house hacker who owns the property, or maybe you're renting an apartment and you're subleasing, you don't have too much concern, because house hacking typically is a longer term game. You're not worried about property values going down 1 year. By the time you're selling, it's going to be a completely different market. So try to not look at the downside. In Texas, for instance, property taxes are so high. If your value goes down, your cost of ownership actually will go down as well. So in the short run, you'll actually be benefiting from this.
That's a good point. The price of the house doesn't really matter until you're looking to sell. And I understand you also wanted to cover problems. So talk to us about the problems with housing.
I think there's kind of a general consensus, especially with millennials, Zoomers, younger generations. It's really hard to break into owning a house nowadays. Basically, the ownership is a problem, as well as even the rents are increasing. A lot of new housing developments, mainly they're in kind of the luxury criteria. The way developers look at it is it's not that much more expensive to just build luxury, and then you can command a much higher rent. There's also a lot of tech workers that are making $100,000+ salaries. Ultimately, anyone who's making less, it's difficult to kind of compete in that housing market.
Like you said in the beginning, you're giving up privacy to make everything more cost efficient. But from your view, it seems like there can also be a lot of positives to co-living.
Yep. So I started living with roommates again prior to COVID. Ultimately, I kind of realized the importance immediately with surrounding yourself with people to socialize with. If you're single, you're not currently living with a significant other, don't have kids, it's important to have, again, kind of people around you that are supportive, having a pet. And you kind of get these benefits with house hacking, where maybe your roommate has a dog. You don't actually have to worry about a lot of the long-term care aspects of a pet, but you get the short-term gratification of being part of that household. And you also get the benefit of just perspective. A lot of the housemates that I've lived with have kind of humbled me and given me perspective on, I guess, their career paths, their choices. And I feel like I would have missed out a lot without those experiences.
Yeah, because the people you live with can be anybody versus, let's say at your job, you meet people, they're probably going to be pretty similar to you in terms of how they think about things. That's a motivation for the podcast too. You know, I get to get all these different views from everybody. Yeah,
absolutely. I've kind of noticed that it's kind of like an echo chamber. A lot of companies, as an accountant, I'm working with other accountants, very similar mindset. Ultimately, you do choose who you live with when it comes to house hacking. If you're able to create a room that's affordable in a very desirable area, you'll actually have hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants. So you have a lot of choice on who you want to share your life with. I've always made it a point to actually sit down and have a meal, maybe have a drink with a future co-living housemate, just kind of to understand what their plans are, what their lifestyle's like, make sure it kind of aligns. It doesn't have to be a random or scary process. It can be a very safe formula where you run background checks, credit checks, you make sure they are who they say they are, maybe they have references.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next about your whole process for choosing a housemate. How do you find people and what do you do to make sure that they are living material, which I guess you just covered in that mini speech about getting meals and doing credit checks?
Yes. So I think there's different kind of tiers of applicants. Ideally, you have kind of a friend of a friend. There's sayings about living with your friends directly that if you choose to live with them, you might not be friends by the end of the lease, just because maybe the reasons why you are friends is because of the distance. I do recommend maybe living with somebody who you're not as close to, just so that you don't have as much at risk if something goes wrong, and you can kind of follow the lease agreement. You don't have to worry so much about losing that friendship. Mainly, you kind of want applicants that it's a referral from a friend, or maybe it's a referral from one of your neighbors within the complex, somebody who is going to be very respectful. If that's not an option, then you can kind of go to, I guess, the second tier. Maybe somebody through work, or you just start looking at the marketplaces like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, Zillow, housing sites. You do want to be careful as far as who you're letting into your home. In my experience, I try to focus on social media because people tell so much about their life, where you can kind of screen them and then invite them privately to see the property, versus if you have an open house. I've had so many people come confused that they were only renting a room and not the entire apartment. They thought they had just found an amazing deal, $500 getting the entire apartment. It's kind of one of those weird spaces to be in where you're attracting everyone looking for very cheap housing.
Right. There are a lot of people looking for very cheap housing. Yeah, especially if you own a nicer property, it might be a little bit harder to find people if you want to charge a little bit more in rent. So I don't know if the process is any different for those types of tenants.
Yeah, we can kind of get into pricing a little bit. So I've actually floated back and forth between two different mindsets. Either you list the property extremely cheap and then utilities are billed on the back end based off actual usage, or you just say all bills paid, here's a price point. As you get into nicer properties, I'm convinced you need to go with the former option, listing just the flat amount, and then utilities are kind of less advertised, mainly so you can remain competitive. Usually by the time you add in bills and everything, you're actually very close to kind of a studio price, at least for downtown Dallas. So you can either live by yourself in maybe a mediocre place, maybe a B-class property, or you can go into a luxury co-living situation, house hacking, and maybe it's marginally more affordable, but you're paying for quality and location over privacy.
Yeah, usually when everyone looks at rooms, they mostly just look at the rent. They don't even think about utilities. So that approach makes sense. You know, you get them all excited about the place for a good price, and then you're like, oh, by the way, you got to pay utilities too.
Well, I do want to stress utilities are very minor with a room. As you can imagine, I mean, electric, water, sometimes it's not even metered. It's maybe extra $50 to $100 at most.
Yeah. Well, depending on the type of property you own, if you own a condo, then it's going to be a lot cheaper versus a single family home, which could be more costly just because there's more space that you have to air condition and everything.
Absolutely. But with a house, if you're splitting it up amongst more renters, rooms, if you have 6 people living in a house, you can still get their utilities pretty low for everyone involved.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Kind of makes me wish instead of having a 2-bedroom, maybe I should have gotten a 3-bedroom and had 2 people renting rooms instead of just one, you know? You said when you started, you spent $100K on a condo and you only put $5K down. That's only 5% down. You said that's not really possible anymore.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that where I'm located in downtown Dallas, Texas, there were very few properties in downtown Dallas that were even $100,000 at the time. but over time they've appreciated. You can still find $50,000 to $100,000 condos all around the city for anyone moving to the area. So you could theoretically follow the same model of putting a small down payment, buying an affordable property, and immediately renting out some of the space to other people. Nowadays, downtown properties are kind of starting at $200,000 at least. I do want to clarify, anytime you put down less than 20%, you start to pay for this additional item. It's another line item. It's called PMI, private mortgage insurance.
Yeah, that's what I was going to go into, because I noticed that even though you only paid 5% down, you are recommending to do a 20% down payment.
I'm not recommending 20%. The reason why I'm not recommending 20% is because in my circumstance specifically, I would have been priced out of the market if I would have waited until I had 20,000. I took my 5,000, put it to work, and the idea was to pay off the difference as quickly as possible. So I realized I didn't have 20,000, but there's this 15,000 deficit that I had to make up. The PMI is it's private mortgage insurance you pay on that 15,000. It's that difference between the 5 and the 20%. So it's very minimal, especially on this small of a purchase price. This new property I'm living in right now, I'm actually paying PMI as well. And it's about $30 a month.
Is the idea of PMI in case you can't afford the mortgage, and then it's like an insurance against you not paying, essentially?
That's correct. So if I basically say my property value was cut in half, and I decided it wasn't worth a 30-year commitment to keep paying on this property, if I step away, the bank is made whole. They view anyone with less than 20% equity as a risk, so they make me pay insurance to protect their investment.
Does that insurance cost increase depending on your income? I would assume it would, because then they would designate you as higher risk, right?
No, it's not based off your income. It's based off it's a combination of credit score and it's the amount that's being insured. So if I'm buying $1 million property and the difference between the 5 and the 20% is over 100,000, that insurance is going to proportionally be a lot higher.
I see, because you only had to insure the 15K.
That's correct. And you're also right about my job, my income. I think your credit score does play a role in the cost as well. What's the likelihood of me defaulting?
Yeah. So for example, let's say you do need to save 20K, and actually for an area like downtown Dallas, which you're in, it would probably be more than that now because of the appreciation.
Well, for this example, we can just double the numbers. Let's say instead of $5,000, I would have to have $10,000 to do the same thing nowadays.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Well, let's kind of jump into that next question of talking about different approaches. How do you get that first $10,000? Part of house hacking, it's really a mindset. If you cannot buy the $200,000 property today, what you can do, say you're living with family and you're not even paying rent, you're comfortable. I would still say it's a mistake to just stay in your parents' household or couch surfing with a friend. Instead, maybe look at apartments that you can rent and splitting it up in a way that you're minimizing your housing costs, but you're getting used to that responsibility of having a tenant, kind of trying out this lifestyle before you commit to buying a property, because you may find that you just don't actually enjoy this process of living so close to somebody else. I have quite a few stories where people talk about just their life changing as soon as they have their own private space. So I do want to stress that this is not a lifestyle that is right for everyone. It's just one more option that I'm hoping to provide everyone.
A lot of cool stuff to think about, but before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to shout out?
I would just shout out my website once more. So again, growyourcash.com. Ultimately, if you have been thinking about, again, house hacking, buying a property, you just kind of want to talk through the numbers, how to make it work. If you can afford it, if it's an investment, need a second opinion on even the market. Is it a good idea to own something in this neighborhood 10 years down the road? That's where I feel like I can add some value, just perspective. Even though I'm not currently in the market, I am always kind of looking at existing deals, kind of reevaluating the homes that I own, does it make sense to reposition myself? So yeah, if you want to schedule a quick call or something, feel free to contact me through the website or my LinkedIn account in the bio. Do we want to spend a little bit of time talking about construction? Like, for instance, how you actually do it? Because when I'm talking about turning like a living room or a dining room into a bedroom, I don't feel like people understand like how you actually do that.
That's a good bit to add.
I made a note that there are like these giant Legos that you can divide rooms. The company that makes them, they're called Everblocks.
Oh, so wait, you actually use giant Legos?
Yes. So there's a company called Everblock, and they decided to make these giant Legos that are like printed or molded. They actually don't know who their target audience is. They're selling to mainly companies, showing people how to build cubicles. They're marketing it as house hacking. Maybe you have a giant loft apartment that's just empty floor plan. So you can take these Legos, you can redesign the rooms to whatever square footage you want. They even have modular like doors that are collapsible. So think very like kind of maybe like a Japanese type simplistic door system.
That's a really cool solution and not have to worry about tearing down walls or anything. I mean, it's not perfect because then I'm sure you don't really get the soundproofing or things like that would increase privacy. But I mean, it looks like a very easy way to do things.
Absolutely. And you can add these Legos and then add insulation between barriers. You can add acoustic panels. There's a lot of soundproofing you can do even with these modular options. I priced it out, and the real benefit of like the Everblock system, again, we're not being sponsored by Everblock, is being able to take them with you. Say you decide to become a house hacker and you're going to use these over 30, 50 years. Theoretically, they shouldn't deteriorate or have any issues. So it's good if you need to resize rooms. So if you want to have one giant space and then the next day just kind of redesign, you can. The cost, though, I think I've calculated it would be thousands of dollars instead of hundreds. If you just go to Home Depot and you're trying to divide a room, you can really just measure everything out, go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's, get a bunch of 2x4s. You can ask in the store, hey, can you cut these down to X, Y, Z, whatever size? They'll handle all that for you. On top of the 2x4s, you can bolt those together. Again, online, you can get a guide how to do this. It should just take a day. You can add plywood, some kind of barrier, and just the wood cost alone, maybe a couple $100. You can get a fully framed door, which again, you'll have a door that locks, and now you've taken something like an open living room and you can have a floor to ceiling divider, walls, and a locking door. When I first moved to downtown Dallas, I actually only had a curtain. So when I was meeting my future roommate, I fully explained the situation. I basically showed him that he would have the bedroom with the locking door. I had to trust him a little bit. I installed my curtain. I just used some 3M coat hooks. I installed them along kind of the ceiling and then mounted a floor-to-ceiling curtain or drape and basically just had them running along this entire living room area. I think I had maybe 2 solid ones. You could probably have some freestanding rack that could hold up a curtain or some basic divider. Right behind them, I just set up bookshelves just to have some feeling that there was actually a wall. But I didn't let not having a wall be the barrier to get started on the process. As soon as I had my tenant, we signed a lease. He gave me a deposit. He gave me first month's rent. And now you can actually ask for maybe an additional month of rent or like last month's rent if you want. Sometimes just having that money, that can fuel the construction costs, any renovations you need to do down the road. So if you've spent all your money buying the property, think of the influx of what happens when you sign a lease. You're going to have a big payday. Right,
that's true. Yeah, that's a few different creative ideas to think about, especially the Everblocks one. I never even heard of those, but Glad I learned about that in case I if I ever need them, I guess. But
Yeah, and I feel like there might be an opportunity for somebody to create like an Everblock showroom. I think I originally approached them maybe like 4 years ago about maybe purchasing $3,000 to $5,000 worth of blocks, basically being the first Lego home, maybe making the news and acting as a showroom so that other prospective buyers could kind of see what the final product looks like when it's fully utilized. Don't think I heard back, but there definitely is an opportunity if somebody wanted to go that route, not just to buy the product, but to maybe even partner with a brand and get some kind of affiliate commission when people see the Lego home and decide to make the same purchase. You probably could get some portion of those sales, and that would be a very lucrative arrangement.
yeah, glad we added in that last bit. Growyourcash.com. I will put a link in the description.
Okay, thanks.
And with that, it's time to say goodbye.
Do people usually say goodbye?
I mean, if you want, you don't have to.